we will be free. For when the rising tide is turned in every London quarter, Parliament comes crashing down with Robert's Rules of Order.
All right, everyone, we are on Sunday, the Lord's Day, right? The Lord of Robert's Day. And our calendar on that day doesn't give us a quiz because on the seventh day, God rested. But what it does, but it gives us a stupid one. When you're taking this parliamentary quiz, you not only have to do the ABCD, whatever questions, they also tell you an answer and make you go find what page it's on.
Now, wait a second. I thought on the seventh day, God condemned parliamentarians to hell.
Well, that too.
What's later?
Because that's very restful.
Yeah, it's like the second layer, I think.
That's recreation.
Yeah.
So we're not going to do I'm not going to say this and make him go find the page. That's kind of dumb.
But what is a page anyway? Just for the hell of it.
Well, I'll read the thing and we'll discuss. Okay. The minutes or record of proceedings of an executive session must be read and acted upon only in executive session unless that which would be recorded in the minutes, that is the action taken as distinct from that what was said in debate, was not secret, or secrecy has been lifted by the assembly. So,
in other words, they can't talk about what they talked about in executive session and open session, but they can have a vote on what they discuss in executive session and open session.
and they should,
Right.
right, and concealing anything that was private, such as a name. But they still would, like for instance, we on the LNC would talk in executive session about salaries of employees, and say we approved a certain salary, we would come back and say that we approve the contract for the employee discussed in executive session at the price discussed during executive
Right.
session.
You're not disclosing anything that's actually disclosed,
Right.
but that was actually discussed, which would be sensitive information, but at the same time, you have to take an action in open session because you can't do votes in executive
Right.
session. So you do it that way to make sure things are discussed properly.
While here though, what is executive session?
In general, at least the way I always understood it, executive session is called when you have to deal with topics of a sensitive nature, usually involving contracts or legal proceedings or disciplinary issues.
Confidential.
Type stuff that strategy can be
Depending.
depending on what you're talking about.
Ballot access strategy often is.
Yeah, ballot. Well, that also can fall into legal areas too,
Yeah.
by definition. I know in the past that on the HOA that I serve on, we've had to do executive session to discuss personnel issues with our own board because we had a screwed up vote that we had to remedy and adjust. In California, we had an entire convention go into executive session because of a disciplinary issue involving a member.
Yeah, disciplinary issues are generally always. Holy cow. Holy cow.
We're having a stampede upstairs.
Yeah.
A stampede of two dogs.
And neither of them are big. One of them's a freaking dachshund.
Yeah, you also don't have insulation in the ceiling.
No,
You're-
it's terrible. Wayne's he's gonna whatever.
Yeah.
So in the past on the LNC, because I like to bring everything back to the LP because that's what we are. Executive session, from what I understand, before my time, but my understanding it was abused. They would call it, and it was for things that just should have been open.
It was.
So the policy manual was amended to say it can only be for certain things. And Nick is fastidious about that.
Yeah, back in the 2007 and 8 era with the whole situation with Angela Keaton going on, there was a lot of abuse of executive session. She called him on it to the point where it was getting. That's one of the reasons things escalated to the point where they had to have this major showdown in the LNC meeting in San Diego, and which eventually led to a whole bunch of things happening. But including the Transparency Caucus. It just got to the point where she wasn't putting up with any of that crap, and she was calling them on it publicly, and the net result of all of it is it all came to a head, and that's one of the things that led to the impetus to start fixing things up.
And that means the people who were in the executive session who would normally, it would be the board, but we can also invite outsiders if they're needed, such
Right.
as staff. Staff's often in it, but they also have to be bound, agree to be bound by the secrecy. And if anyone cannot agree to be bound, they're supposed to recuse themselves from the meeting. And Star Child would do that often.
Yeah.
He just would say, oh, I'm not going to agree to this, and he would recuse himself from
Right.
the meeting.
Right. And it has to be people who are relevant to the topic at hand. It can't just be Joe Schmo off the street.
Right, because it has to be voted on. It's
Right.
not automatic.
Right. So if they're talking about an issue, say a contract for a staff member for the LNC, they can't sit there and invite me in there as just as a party member to sit in.
Because he's
on
nosy,
things.
right.
Because well, not because I'm nosy, because I have no
He's nosy.
I have no dog in the fight. And besides the way the LNC leaks, I'll hear about it eventually anyway. But
Not for me. You know, I'm tight-lipped.
yeah, I also know that traditionally the LNC is leaked like a sieve.
Oh, well, of course. You know, that's then when you got more than 3 people in the room.
Yes.
That's probably when you got more than 2 people in the room.
Yes.
What amused me, and I do this, and Nick does this too, since executive session to me is the exception rather than the rule, and should be looked upon somewhat with disfavor, and used infrequently and for as short a time as possible, is I don't refer to it as the executive session. I call it secret session. And so does Nick. And Starchild did that. And it drives some people up a wall. And I would put in the minutes that because Starchild would insist that he goes, nope, I call it secret session. And I've had objections to that. But it's secret session. And I call it that to remind everyone that this is an exception. You know, executive sounds so hoity-toity, you know? Secret.
Executives sounds like a bunch of stuffed shirts with ties cutting off the blood circulation of their brains.
And I don't like any elected person, be it on the LNC or in government, to think they're bigger than their britches. So I don't like those fancy sounding titles. So I called it secret session.
Okay, I'm looking at one thing about it real fast because I might have a question to further on this. No, not a recess. That's not the right answer. I can just turn the page back. There we go. Okay, here's the question. What's the vote standard to go into executive session?
Majority.
Okay, because it's not listed in Robert's.
It's not?
Not as far as I can see.
It has to be. No, well, I don't know
It's
what
not.
I don't have the policy manual here. In the future, I'll bring the policy
It
manual.
might be in there, but it's not in here. In the
Well, I
bylaws.
know that the way we operate, it's 50%.
Which makes sense.
So that's a good question, though. If it's not specified anywhere, I always judge that the default is 50%. I mean, that's a pretty good guess.
Yeah.
So, unless it's, to me, this is a good rule of thumb. The default for everything, if not specified otherwise, is 50% plus 1, unless it's depriving a member of its rights, of their rights, then it's 2/3. That's a good, you'll be right 99% of the time. All right, that's it for this Sunday. You know, all right, yeah, he's going to adjourn.
Enjoy your playoffs.
Okay, so we're alternating, and even though I did last year this way.
Yeah.
Got it.